All right.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but today we are going to go and continue our Second Chances month with a pick from Jacob. And I'm just going to hand you over to Jacob so that he can tell you all about what tonight's film is all about.
All right. So tonight we are going to look at a movie that I saw for the first time, I think, when I was in early high school. I'm almost certain my dad showed it to me and did not take to it, and I've been meaning to come back ever since. And since we're doing second chances, we're doing a second look at, for me anyway, at 1955's film by Charles Laughton, his one and only film as a director, The Night of the Hunter. IMDb gives the basic synopsis. A religious fanatic marries a gullible widow whose young children are reluctant to tell him where their real daddy hid $10,000 he'd stolen in a robbery.
Uh,
Or the other way of putting it, what's it?
Technically, he's a serial killer who pretends to be a preacher.
No, I get the impression that he genuinely believes half the stuff he peddles. He's just so messed up.
He's really good at fooling people.
Oh yeah, he is. And actually, that the he that we are speaking to, of course, is the preacher, who is the Robert Mitchum character, and we'll get into that in a little bit because that's going to be a big part of the talk. But I think we'll go ahead and do the run around and everyone kind of say, is this your, I guess we'll start with you, Dustin. I guess this,
sorry, I kind of jumped in a little early there.
That's all right.
But I really love this movie, like a lot. And I was pretty excited to get to see it again. So the first time I saw this was around my kind of 2012 conversion to horror fandom sort of moment. So I had found this VH1 thing. It was like 100 scariest movie moments, and I actually used that as kind of a springboard for what movies to like start seeing. And one of the moments was Night of the Hunter, which it's a scene that we'll talk about when the preacher comes after some of his victims, like on these stairs. And I was like, that sounds weird. Well, let's see it. And my opinion at the time was that every movie made before 1970 was garbage. I was like in my early 20s, give me a break. And Night of the Hunter really, really changed a lot of that, because it's like, wow, this has like sharp pacing, like this is exciting, like the preacher is actually scary. Like, what's actually scary anymore? Whoa. So it blew me away pretty good. And I'd been meaning to get the Criterion Blu-ray of it for a very long time. But what kept me off of that was kind of like a lack of opportunity. Like for some reason, this particular Criterion title, despite being just like a standard like Blu-ray, it's like $10 more than all of the other Criterion titles.
Well, it is a 2-disc edition, so that's part of it.
I think I kind of realized that a little bit earlier when I noticed it's like, wait, there's another disc in here. It's like, oh, this is like a 3-hour extra documentary,
right?
Which I did not get to, but well, I had class today, so.
Right.
But yeah, I love this movie, and it kind of changed my entire perception of what movies like from the 50s and 40s could actually be like. Like after this, I think I saw Fritz Lang's M for the first time too, and that also kind of, it's like, oh well, anything can be good. So it's kind of special to me for those reasons.
And of course, both M and Night of the Hunter are widely renowned for a certain musical note that's associated with the hunters, if you will. A certain whistling or hymn or whatever. But we'll get into that too. And incidentally, spoiler alert, the usual warning.
I mean, you know us by now. We're gonna
Right.
spoil the Jesus out of this movie.
All right. So, Dave, is this your first go around with this one?
This is my first time watching this, so
Mm-hmm.
definitely. I mean, at least in its entirety. I'd seen bits and pieces of it over time, and just for the sake of this podcast, I went on and watched it not moments before I set this link up. So, yeah, I mean, there were some dark elements to this stuff. And I'd seen Robert Mitchum before, mostly in westerns, and seeing him in this. Well, this isn't the first time I've seen him in a creepy role. Wasn't he in Cape Fear?
Yes, he was.
So
he was in both versions.
Never seen it.
Yeah. He was.
Well, at least the remake. That remake was good.
They're both good, but like the original, you got Gregory Peck and Robert Mitchum, and then in Scorsese's remake, they both show up in cameos on the opposite side of the law from where they were before. So it's kind of fun.
I remember there's a Simpsons episode where they did like a Cape Fear thing with
Sideshow Bob. Yes,
and they gave him one of the creature's character traits.
I shall send you to heaven before I send you to hell.
So one of the preacher's defining characteristics in this is he has love tattooed across his knuckles on one hand and hate tattooed across the knuckles on the other hand. And in a Simpsons episode, they homage that. It's like Shabab's in prison and he's showing off his knuckles and he has LUV, love, on one hand, because the Simpsons characters have 3 fingers instead of 4. And on the other hand, it's HA with with a line over it, so like a long A and the G.
So, I love it. Guess everyone thought it meant hat.
The A is look closer. It's in long A's.
Good times. Dave, were you still going?
Sorry.
No. I think I'll along with the discussion on the rest of it because I'm still mulling over my thoughts.
Okay. Brandon, how about you?
Well, this was my first time, and I remember watching this.
Mute your mic, Dave.
Okay, I'm getting an echo. There we go.
Jesus.
In any case, I remember watching this for the first. Well, I've watched it for the first time just yesterday. So I was kind of interested in seeing what it was that Jacob wouldn't have liked back on Criterion.
This is a first
and I've seen it
too.
Yep.
Get some culture, people. Lord.
I admit, I've watched some Criterion stuff that I know that you haven't been as fond of, but we're neutral to.
It was a joke. I'm sorry. I feel bad now.
No, it's all right. And I've been like, maybe this is going to be boring as hell. What am I going to get into?
You were thinking it was like Grand Illusion, right?
Oh, good God. One that I almost put up. But I was impressed by it. The way that the character creation and the story itself kept me interested for the whole film. And that takes a lot for me. My mind wanders a lot. So that just in and of itself was awesome. And just the way that they did the characters, especially the main villain, he was so well created. It was so well made. It was quite an amazing experience for me. I was quite happy to have seen it.
Yeah, you get a sense of exactly who he is, like in the first few minutes with his scenes.
Right.
Like driving around with the car at the very beginning. It's just like singing this song about all the widows he's looking for.
I know you don't mind the killing, Lord. Your book's got plenty of that.
Yeah. Yep.
The movie
What?
opens with them finding like his most recent victim, and he's driving a stolen car away.
Right.
You know, the funny thing about while he's driving, I could definitely tell that was a screen in the background. But
Oh yeah.
clear it was. I mean,
Well,
the darn thing was shaking, and you could see that it was a theater screen in the background.
well, bear in mind this was a low budget film from the 50s. I mean, it was going to be and also, and we'll get into this, but they what am I trying to say? They encouraged that. But that's actually a good segue into my thing. As I said before, I was introduced to this probably too early. I grew up with a lot of old films, watching them on the, weekend afternoons with my folks and that kind of thing. And there were a few older films that I was a big fan of. I would not go so far as what Dustin said that anything before 1970 was garbage, but I did not have an appreciation. I did not have an appreciation for older film until much later. When I was in high school, I was kind of just developing an appreciation for film as art in the first place. And I definitely had not got far. I was still in the realism is everything mode. And so something that's at all expressionistic or tries to court a feeling of unreality was not going to rest well with me. Also, there is the fact that I was fairly religious at the time, and to me, the film was borderline blasphemous the first time I saw it. I actually had a reaction probably not dissimilar to what the people at the time would have had. And I was totally unprepared for this kind of character that Mitchum was playing. And so, yes, I had a very thorough dislike of the film the first time. When we came up with this topic, it was hard for me to come up with a film I truly hated because I hardly ever will watch a film to completion that I hate. Very rarely. Very, very rarely. And usually I feel like there's a really good idea, a reason to do it. But one of the films my dad showed me in this time period was The Graduate, and I went back to that 4 years later, 3 years later. I went from hating it to loving it. So I was like, yeah, maybe this one will be, But I over the years, I was shocked the steadily increasing drumbeat of praise for this movie. Finding out it was in the Criterion Collection, finding out that it's considered a classic, finding out it's one of Robert Mitchum's greatest roles, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm going, I must have missed something. So I went back and watched it again for this, and I've actually watched it 2 more times because I watched the commentary track, and it definitely gave me a much better appreciation for the film. This is one that if I had seen it for the first time this year, I probably would have liked it quite a bit and been intrigued by Mitchum's character, but a little bit disappointed about the way the film was constructed until learning all the background information. And even then, I'm slightly disappointed at the construction of the film. But Mitchum does the preacher is a great character, and it's a great performance. Some of the supporting performances were great. I liked Mr. Spoon; he was pretty hilarious, and there were a couple other good ones. But overall, it's a flawed movie, but it's a good one. It's very different. And I'm intrigued that it was the start and end of Laughton's career as a director. It was very interesting. But anyway, so I guess we'll go into
that was kind of a funny thing. That was kind of a funny thing to find out about in the supplemental materials on. I watched it on Criterion too. Right. And it's like, oh yeah, he was a famous like stage actor or whatever.
Yeah. Well, he was an Oscar-winning actor. He was pretty well known on screen too.
And well, they made the comment that nowadays pretty much nobody remembers that he was an actor, but it's like, hey, he directed Night of the Hunter.
Right, yeah. No, I mean, he was Oscar nominated for his role in one of the many Kane Mutiny movies, and I do remember that. And I think he won for, what was it, The Private Life of Henry VIII or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a few notable ones. He was in a couple of Hitchcock films and, that kind of thing. And there's a little bit of a Hitchcock vibe here, but really it's more other things that kind of show up in here. But
there's this much more sinister overtone.
Well, for the most part, yeah. And so anyway, we've got... and actually, there is a Hitchcock connection that a lot of people compared this role. This role was considered a problematic role. They wanted to get was it Gary Cooper, and he didn't want. He was like, "This will ruin my career," and a lot of people think that Psycho ruined Anthony Perkins' career, even though it's like one of the great roles of all time. It was really dark, and people didn't like that.
I didn't think it was that dark, but we went into that on our episode.
Right. Well, at the time,
dark for the time.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, I have a hard time believing that the preacher character didn't make people faint in the theater, because like he is so dark and vicious.
Right.
Like he's like a modern character. Like this is something that would be written today.
Well, I imagine at the time, especially the way he is towards the children. I mean, the words that he was saying were not exactly preacher words.
No, quite a few of them weren't.
Or any person, for that matter. I mean...
Well, it actually, okay, well, we'll probably talk a little more on the character in a moment, but I do want to do a little bit more on the basic plot. So, because IMDb doesn't give a whole lot here. So, basically is, I think, Dustin, you mentioned
that was a crummy synopsis.
Right.
So, the first scene of this movie is pretty much like 4 or 5 minutes, where we're introduced to the preacher, and we really do learn like everything about him right away. Like it's the first scene of the movie, which is why.
Well, you actually mentioned a scene that came before where they found the dead body, and you technically have that intro with the woman, Miss Cooper, talking to the children. Yeah. So, but yeah, then your first extended sequence is definitely the one with the preacher.
Yeah, apparently that was supposed to go at the end of the movie, apparently, and they just put it at the front as kind of like a bookend sort of thing to make you think, oh, maybe, this grandmotherly old lady in the sky is the body we're finding.
And of course, that was played by Lillian Gish, who was a star of silent film. But yeah, she gives this little speech about that the rotten tree will bear rotten fruit, and that little passage, and then she says, beware the wolf that comes in sheep's clothing, and
beware of false prophets.
Exactly, and yes.
Then these kids find a woman's body,
right,
in this house that they're playing near, and right after that, we're introduced to the preacher, like in his car, having his conversation with God, talking about how he's been killing widows for their money. It's like, yep, you keep helping me find them, Lord. You don't mind the killing.
I think it was 15. No, was it 25? Was it
not? Was it 6, 9, 12? Near the end of the movie, we found out it's 25.
Yeah. That's but I mean, that's a great intro. It really is. And then you cut to him in the theater where he's watching a burlesque show, and you get the little bit with the knife coming through the pocket in anger. Because I can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine anyone more pissed off to be at a burlesque show than.
Well,
he's
established as like a bloodthirsty misogynist,
right?
And they they confirm it later with a speech that he gives after he marries another unfortunate widow.
Right.
But it's really graphic because he's sitting there at the show, almost kind of like stoking himself up, like for like his next murder, for his like next victim. Like the hand that has hate tattooed on it is just like angrily clenched into a fist as he just watches this display of female sexuality, and he reaches into his pocket and he's like fondling his switchblade, like that's his signature weapon. He's fondling his switchblade and until he like clicks it and it like cuts a hole in his pocket, and it's just like the knife of the blade sticking out, and it's like, oh my god, like it was really subtle, but it gives you a real feel for like the pathology of this guy.
And they originally wanted it to go through his pants, but they never would have got that past the censors. So they,
no.
I remember that story from the commentary. Like they were like, "Okay, here's what we want to do," and it was like, "No."
Yeah. And then, of course, while he's there, he gets pinched for stealing the car, and he's sent to jail. And then you have this scene where Ben Harper, who's played by Peter Graves, comes barreling home with a wad of money, and he gives it to his son and says, "Please, here, hide this and don't tell anyone about it." And then the police arrest him, and he ends up cellmates with Harry Powell. And so that's what really sets the main plot into motion, where Powell finds out about this stash of money and his soon-to-be widow. And it's like the Lord is speaking to him. He has to go. He has to do this thing. And but you have this semi-comic scene in the jail cell of Mitchum hanging over the bomb casket, trying to get him to talk in his sleep, and it was actually pretty funny. But and you also have this great line there where he's saying all this crazy stuff, and Harper's like, "What religion are you?" And he's like, "I'm a religion I worked out betwixt myself and the Lord." It's like, yeah, can we say bullshit?
I'm a religion of it.
I bet you did.
Yeah. So I just love that description, though. That's like that, to me, that perfectly encapsulates the people who bend religion to their own ends. Is they worked it out betwixt themselves and the Lord. You know,
I can. Now, one of the things I can see, and I will admit, that if you're watching it young, when you're, I mean, he is a character that's definitely, if you're a religious person, you could look at that in a way of like messing up with God or messing with religion.
Yeah, it was definitely a kind of a. It was weird for me. It was definitely weird. But again, coming back to it now, I'm actually able to look at it and go, that is a really interesting. That is really, and they make the point, and Dustin, you probably saw this too, they make the point in a lot of the bonus features that both Laughton and Mitchum intentionally undercut Mitchum's character's evil with humor to kind of make him a little less threatening. But they also, in a way, though, it almost makes him more threatening because it makes him look insane. And
like he's just barely holding it in. Like there are a lot of scenes where he just goes. There are a couple of scenes where he just goes nuts out of nowhere. Like he's like cackling and making weird sounds, and it's just like, oh, that's.
And it really makes you wonder. It really makes you wonder what he will do. Like, if they had played him straight evil, it probably would have been more predictable and less scary to people. You know what I mean?
Less effective by any means.
Yes.
It was a good choice, though, what they did. He came across as very unhinged.
And they also make the point in the bonus features, again, that little conversation with him and Harper, they make the point of noting that he never once mentions the name of Jesus any point in the movie.
Exactly.
And he also his theology is incredibly warped, but the movie definitely doesn't support his version for long. You know what I mean? So that's kind of I like that they did undercut him as a religious figure because they had to. They never would have gotten away with doing it otherwise.
Yeah,
They,
and
they
the
barely got away with this.
yeah, there was a good point that was made that they found that the creators of this found religion, like viewed religion as repressive, um, because I keep forgetting the director's name. What was it, Lawton?
Charles Laughton, yeah.
Yeah, I guess Lawton was gay, and that was like the religious repression would have really factored into his life, like especially at that time period.
Right.
So it seems like a lot of his own experience kind of went into like the preacher's character, like just using religion as something to help him hurt people.
Right.
So I think I appreciated that.
Right. Now you do see the more positive representations of religion later on, but you definitely see the hypocrisy of Powell, but you also see how easily led into religious fervor some of the other characters were too.
Right.
And it's kind of but yeah, so you have this, and they make a point in the bonus features of talking about dualities and how Lawton wanted to do dualities repeatedly. And one thing he repeated was the courtroom sequence of the sentencing of Powell and Harper. And they're almost identical scenes, but just minor tweaks. And there's a lot of moments like that where they did. And when they're both arrested, they're choreographed very, very, very similar. So it's almost like deja vu, which may be one of the reasons the kid had the reaction he did for the second one. But
kind of funny thing, I thought on the trial scene, like it's so similar. Like I think what they might have done is they just had I remembered everybody's name up until this moment. This sucks. I think they might have just had Harry Powell like step off camera. Right. And had Ben step in camera. Like that's how similar the shots are. Like
it's possible.
It looks like the judge is sitting like in the exact same like spot, place, and position that he was in the previous like trial scene. So it's oh, did he just not move?
The lighting is subtly different, but yeah, they you're right. It looks like the judge was just kind of there. But yeah, so anyway, you have Powell gets out, after a while, and in the meantime, you've been introduced to the Harper. Well, you've been reintroduced to Harper's family. You got the kids, John and Pearl, and you got
Did they necessarily say what Harper did? Because I thought it was sort of implied that he robbed a bank. So he's hanged for murder. So it sounds like best I can tell, he robbed a bank and like probably shot like some guards.
I think they said he killed 2 people. Did I hear that right?
They said he killed 2 people, and so we know for sure that happened. But I'm trying to figure out, who do you just randomly kill for $10,000? So I always assumed it was a bank robbery gone bad.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah. See, and I had thought that Robert Mitchum's character was actually in cahoots with Mr. Harper already because he'd stolen the car.
No.
But
well, there's a scene later where somebody's talking about, it's like, oh yeah, somebody knifed a farmer and stole their horse. And we see the preacher on a horse, like later on, shortly after that. So this guy, Preacher Powell has no problem killing people for like transit or stealing transit. So I bought that he would just, do that like on his own pretty readily.
Yeah, and it could have even been the widow he killed. It could have been her car. They didn't really get into that, I don't imagine. But
it seems like nobody made much of a connection between the widow
Right.
killings and him until it was suddenly like linked with
Right.
the final victim.
Yeah,
Wasn't
which
until
is
the very
kind of
end.
strange. Is he's obviously not a master criminal, so it's kind of interesting that that he got along that long. But then again, this was during the Depression, and the news didn't travel as well then as it does now. People didn't. What's that?
Most definitely.
Yeah. So he goes back. Willa. Meantime, the very unusually named Icy Spoon and Walt Spoon are a couple townspeople that are really close with Willa, and I guess she works for them. And Icy is just riding her hard to get another husband. It's like, yeah, okay, no, never mind that she might kind of have some lingering affection for her not yet dead.
Husband.
Yes.
Well,
But
her
that-
husband he was hanged like
yeah.
I'm assuming a few weeks because Powell is supposed to spend 30 days in jail. They've
Ah,
clearly
okay.
been in jail for a little while because of the way they talk to each other in the cell
Okay.
before Ben is executed. And so
Okay.
I'm assuming this is happening after Ben's actual execution.
Right. But I mean, again, that would still mean this is probably just 2-3 weeks later at the
Yeah.
most. This is probably,
Exactly.
So he's not cold yet.
Well, he's
but
pretty cold.
but then again, she's icy, so I guess.
Subtle.
Yeah, and then of course the preacher shows up, and she just immediately falls for him and his charm and everything. And Walt's fooled. Will is skeptical. Pearl falls for him right away, but yeah.
I know that at that picnic or whatever that
Yeah.
she said that she thought it might have been too soon to
Right.
think of marriage or something like that. And I was like, wait, what? They're already thinking of marriage?
Well, before that, you have that great scene where he shows up in the shop.
Yeah.
And he gives the whole love and hate speech, which was a big part of his shtick. And what do y'all think of that?
Yeah, that was creepy because it's
What's that?
well,
That was weird.
it's like he does this. It's like a hand wrestling like metaphor. Love and hate, and they're always a fighting. And it looks like hate's gonna win, but no, love wins out. In his like preacher voice, and it completely bamboozles the shit out of all the old people in that room.
Right.
They're like,
Right.
wow, it's amazing.
Right.
And, like he is able to play them so readily. It's almost funny.
And he makes a show of, well, I can't really stick around. And, well, what's that you're making? And Icy's like, it's my fudge, but if you want Annie, you got to come to the picnic. It's like he plays it so that they're keeping him in town, but it's obvious that,
why he's here.
Yeah.
And Wilma even suspects it's like, what if he just heard about the money and he thinks I have the money? And, Icy is just like, nah. So Icy pretty much pushes her into his arms.
Right.
Icy basically gets her killed.
Basically, yeah.
And then, of course, after she pushes her into his arms, she's like to the others, well, I think it's a little strange to have her take to him so well,
Yeah.
Do that? I missed that.
And then meanwhile, Walt's just sitting there enjoying some chicken, just watching everything.
Oh man, did you catch that line? It's like I'm trying to remember exactly what she said, but it was something like, I've been married to my Walt for 45 years, and when I'm lying there, I think about canning. That's what I think about.
Yeah, and his reaction.
And Walt just kind of like looks dejected and like puts down like the food that he was going to start eating. And he's like,
That was pretty good.
What was that? That was so good.
And then, meanwhile, little John also has a friend, a riverboat dude named Uncle Bertie.
Uncle Bertie.
Yeah. And who apparently is played by James Gleason, but he was played by another person. They filmed all the scenes. Laughton didn't like him, fired him, and hired a new person.
Nice.
But it was, I thought he did a good job too. But he's sort of the surrogate father figure for John, although a fairly ineffectual one, as you find out later on.
He's basically an old drunk guy,
right,
who knows boats. So, John's dad, before he died, had like this little rowboat kind of thing. Had this rowboat, and so Uncle Bertie is helping John repair the old rowboat. And they kind of you get the feeling they kind of hang out, like they go fishing, and he's Uncle Bertie's teaching him how to fish. And it's like, oh well, fish is the gar, and he talks about gar fishing for gar, stuff like just kind of.
I had to slightly
kind of stuff,
I had to slightly disagree with his nasty representation of gar, but.
But
I understand.
I thought that was pretty funny in its folksiness.
Well, yeah. I mean, that seems like a logical folk idea. They steal the bait and all that stuff, but it's like, gar, cool.
Well, yeah. I mean, this has a very rural. This whole movie has a very rural vibe to it.
Yes.
And I think that's just one of the kind of nice touches in there, for character development. You get a real sense of where we are and who these people are from how they talk, the way they talk, the words and phrases they use.
Right.
At first when I saw the steamboat come while John was watching it or whatnot, that one little scene where you saw the steamboat on the river, I was thinking Mark Twain kind of timing because.
They mentioned the Depression, so this is the 30s.
Yeah, definitely a Depression era, but the steamboat does bring to mind a little bit. And the trip down the river, to me, a trip down the river, I will always at least think a little bit Huck Finn kind of coming to mind, But apparently this was more set on the Ohio, along the West Virginia-Ohio border. So definitely a smaller river than the Mississippi itself. But
Bertie makes the comment when he sees the steamboat. It's like, she doesn't stop here anymore, but she still says hi. When the steamboat pull the horn or whatever the fuck it's called.
Right.
So we're kind of not that far removed from that time, but that time definitely passed is kind of the sense you get there. So maybe right after the beginning of the Great Depression.
Yeah, somewhere right around then.
So 30, 31-ish, I think, right? That would be my best guess for when this happens.
That sounds about right.
From what I understand, this was actually based on a true story, actually. So, I don't know.
It was based on a novel. I don't know if the novel was based on a true story.
It was.
I mean, it was probably.
It was based on a true story. I was reading up on it. There was actually a man who was hanged in 1932 by the name of Harry Powers. For the murder of 2 widows and 3 children in Clarksburg, West Virginia. So, that's kind of what this all is based on. So,
wow. I kind of want to look up more about that later because nobody mentioned anything about that, in the on the Criterion thing. I mean, I haven't hit the 2.5 hour documentary that comes with this thing yet, but I kind of hope they talk about that in there.
Yeah, I saw something about it on IMDb. They made a mention about that. I mean, this is obviously a strongly fictionalized rendition of it, but
A
yeah,
a lot of times, like I have trouble because of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I kind of have trouble believing, based on a true story, and it's like because based on a true story in that case is like, Ed Gein was a thing. He did kind of one of these things ish.
that was one that could have been my pick for this, but I decided to go with one that I might actually enjoy.
It's like the
But
best movie. Like that movie makes me hungry. Damn, now I want chili. Thanks a lot.
man, all right. So, and we also skipped, I think, before the scene at the Spoon shop. Actually, I believe the first, if I remember correctly, the first time the kids kind of encounter the Reverend is they're in their bedroom and and John is standing and they're talking, and then all of a sudden you see a shadow with a hat over top of him, and
And
they look out the window and he's standing at their gate, and it's like,
it's so good.
yeah,
John's little sister is like, "Tell me a story," and it's like, "Well, once upon a time there was a king who lived in Africa,
mhm,
and one day bad men came for him, and he told his son to protect his gold and kill anybody who tried to steal it. And then
mhm,
the king went away. And then the bad men took the king away. But then one day the bad men came back, and right at that beat,
yeah,
the whole room just fills with like the shadow of
right.
Harry Powell, and it's like, oh my god.
And was he singing at that moment? I can't remember.
Uh, I don't think he was singing yet. He just kind of like steps there.
Right.
It's kind
Yeah,
of
It's a menacing
everything.
presence.
Oh yeah. So you had so then of course they get married, and the it's kind of an the wedding night was a very interesting scene, very kind of a rough scene actually.
because the preacher's thing is like he's
Right,
disgusted by the female body, and
right,
he even explicitly said, it's like, I know what you really hate, Lord. Them perfumed things, and it's like, ugh, Jesus.
yeah.
And so like she expects it's like, okay, it's our wedding night, and she's like looking at herself in the mirror, and she seems to be kind of like happy with herself. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, and then he's just like, look at you, disgust me.
Well, before that, you get this really interesting beat where it's like he is laying on his side facing away, and she comes in, and he reaches back almost like he's reaching for her, but then he points at the window, close the window. And it's like, wow. It's like, well, he just killed the mood.
She finds her knife in his pocket too, because his jacket is
Oh,
up, and
Jesus.
she's looking at the knife. She's like, "Ha, man!" It's like,
Oh, man.
what?
You saw it, you're like, she's doomed.
It's like he's gonna use that on you.
Yeah.
But
I saw that. I was like, that is not the reaction you should be having.
she is not a bright character. Like, and a few
No.
characters even kind of say so a few times too.
And and I don't know that we mentioned Willa's the Shelley Winters character in here. And Winters is a fine actress, but she's not given a lot to work with in this movie, unfortunately. I think I think that was one of my biggest issues. Maybe not the first time I saw it, but it's one of my bigger issues now. Is I feel like in a lot of ways she's almost used as a plot device, because the changes she goes through just seem too abrupt. Like,
And she becomes pretty resigned too. So I
yes,
think I agree with your analysis as a plot device. Although she does have kind of some moment of clarity in her life.
yeah, she has a couple good moments, and this scene was definitely a good moment. She got some good because he was just laying it on her. He was saying all these really crazy things, and it was like, he's like, "Do you want more kids?" And she's like, "Well, well, if you don't want to procreate, then yeah." It's like, whoa.
But I think that, there's two things that make me wonder about the man
Yeah.
itself. One, it could just play into his own religious beliefs. But two, there's also the possibility that the man himself was gay.
Yeah, it's possible.
And that could also lead. And
Just
again,
like
it's hard to.
maybe.
Again, it could be that because there are plenty of people who are just blatant homophobic, but they are gay in actuality, or they end up going to the extreme to hide that, which is a possibility.
Yeah, but given the background on this, I kind of doubt that's what they were aiming for. I'm sure some people have read
it what was aiming for. But then again, you could say politically, even then, that kind of individual is somebody that the creator might want to point it out. So
I was just about to speak. But I know that some people have been in Hollywood been known to swing both ways as well. So Clark Gable being one of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Neat. I remember hearing stories from what's Adam West Batman's Robin, Burt Ward. I remember hearing stories from Burt Ward from somewhere about how Adam West would just take him to like the most insane like Hollywood orgies. And it was like, well, I'm not going to look into this because I really don't want to think about Adam West in that way.
Well, they're just they're staying in character. I mean, anyway,
we've been struck dead with laughter.
Oh, jeez.
But
anyway,
we get a bit of a. I can't quite remember if this comes before or after the wedding night scene. We get some dialogue between Powell and John. You know, you'll never be my dad, and it's like, where's the money? You know, it's like he made me promise I wouldn't tell. Oh shit!
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think that was when he was telling him, because he told John himself that the marriage was happening. Yeah, I think that was that scene. But of course, he keeps at it. He keeps telling John, we shouldn't have lies. We shouldn't keep secrets. And he keeps trying to work on the sister and tell her we shouldn't keep secrets. And every time it almost works, John finds a way to. But he keeps digging deeper by confirming that she knows something. And it's like, and then of course they've got the Williful that they don't really know anything.
It's like, he told me he dropped the money in the river.
Yeah. And he somehow turns her into a religious fanatic because of that whole. That was one thing that I found, like, that was too much of a change, I guess.
Like, her kind of big character trait is that she's very passive and easy to manipulate. And so I could see him, doing that to her pretty easily.
She's not really the only one, because a lot of people were at that revival meeting, and that was kind of.
He's a good charmer.
Oh yeah.
Like,
there's also some shades of Elmer Gantry in this too, because that was a similar thought. Although he wasn't nearly as blatantly evil. But I wonder if that was a one of the things Laughton had in mind. Could have been. But what was the next?
I've got the Criterion Blu-ray up, and I'm clicking through the timeline to help remember where we are in the plot, which has been pretty great. So the next scene after that is we get our scene of what they really. This is where we first learn what actually happened to the money. So they hid it in They hid it in Pearl's doll, but she always carried with her. And so Pearl is playing in the yard with just the pile of money next to her out in the open, and she's using scissors to cut some of the big bills into doll shapes.
Yes.
which
Yeah.
made me wince momentarily because it's like, oh, don't cut those up. Oh my god.
And then, of course, you have the really
The actual
creepy
danger, like
scene.
John shows up and it's like, what are you doing? And don't be mad. You know, like little kid voice. And they start stuffing the money into the doll as fast as they can. And then the preacher shows up right away. It's like, what are you doing over there? Nothing. It's like, if he took like just a few more steps in their direction, they would have died.
Right.
Well, one thing I wanted to say, and I kept trying to say it, and then I realized, oh, wait, my mic is muted.
Oh, well, there you
Which
go.
was about the widow. You were talking about her. It's like, well, maybe she was converted a little bit too quickly. And one of the things I wanted to just point out is that the widow is somebody who is holding on to a lot of guilt, a lot of self-guilt.
Yeah.
In her mind, she really drove her previous husband to commit the act by, complaining about her lot in life. And in a way, he was feeding in to her own feelings of guilt. And this is something that defines the character. I think there's more to her than just naivety. I think that it was, I think there is some depth to that.
And also, Icy was feeding into that beforehand. I think she'd actually been fanning those flames long before the preacher showed up.
I hated her, but that was, she was one of two characters I had a hard time finding any reason to like. The other one being Pearl. I hated Pearl. I still hate Pearl.
This 4-year-old girl, you piece of shit.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining hating a character like that.
And apparently Laughton himself lost patience with her, and Mitchum ended up helping direct her because Laughton couldn't deal with such a young child. He did good with the older kid.
Like, I was gonna say, like with Icy, like I do like Icy's kind of last scene, which we will get to eventually. Just like the complete 180. It's like, how dare you betray us like this?
Yeah,
like I enjoyed that.
Well, she's the kind of person you don't want to screw over.
Yes,
and have them know about it.
Yeah.
her wrath is probably very rough.
Right.
I can't wait to talk about that. That's gonna be fun.
One interesting thing that I saw in the production materials that I saw on the DVD were they talked about that scene with the kids and the money and the preacher in the background. And I think they said that the script originally called for multiple cuts between the two. And then they decided to just film it in one long take with the preacher just in the background, and how that heightened the tension for the whole scene. And I'm thinking, I think I agree with that. I'm thinking that was a really good example of less cuts is more.
Oh, it was definitely much better for that.
Yeah.
And then I think right after we have Willow's murder, I think after that, because
you have that weird, creepy scene in their bedroom. Yeah.
Well, she's coming home from her job at the ice cream shop, and she overhears Powell like threatening Pearl. And it's like, you tell me where the money is, or I'll rip your arm off. And so they're in their bedroom, and she has kind of a realization of what's really going on. Like, she figures it out. It's like, you were after the money. You think the children know where it is. And, he's solemnly shutting the windows, gets out his knife, and she just kind of lies there. It's like, I don't know, she's very resigned to it. Like, even like he gets on the bed and like leans over her and raises the knife, and she doesn't even react. Like, that was pretty chilling, I thought. But also, I mean, fight back a little, goddamn.
I know, that was one of the problems I had. I mean, like, she got all pissed off when he threatened the kids. What'd she think he's going to do once she's out of the way? I mean, yeah, she
She
should have
doesn't have
gone
to
all
deal
mama
with it
bear.
anymore.
What's that?
Well, she doesn't have to deal with it anymore. There you go.
She was secretly wanted to be rid of Pearl too.
Yeah, she hated Pearl as much as I did.
Well, there's kind of a religious guilt kind of feel in there too. It's like
Right.
she's lying there like, I deserve this.
Well, you notice even
Yeah,
after
no.
he threatened Pearl, Pearl still somewhat trusted him.
Yeah.
Hey.
This kind of shows like whenever he's like around women, like he's very good at manipulating them, except for Miss Cooper.
Right.
So I think that's just kind of part of his character, because whenever we see him with Pearl, most of the time, like, I'm your friend, you can trust me. And it seems to really work well in that particular case. So I think that's kind of the explanation I have for that.
I think he just likes looking down the barrel of a gun.
So we had a couple of interesting sequences following this. You have Uncle Bertie's discovery of Willa, and that was a pretty effective scene there. But then you have the part where you realize that, oh, well, he's not going to be any help, because instead of going and getting the police or something,
like he panics and just
he panics. He's like, oh, they'll blame me. I'll just drink myself into a stupor.
It's like, how would they blame you?
Yeah,
that was a really artful shot too. Like he's in the gar fishing spot, and so Powell tied Willa up like in her nightgown and like put her in their car and sunk it. And Uncle Bertie hooks part of the car, and he looks down. So it's a beautiful, like really grim shot where she's just in the water, and you can see like the huge slash, like where he cut her throat, which is something you never see in like older movies like that.
Right.
So it was really jarring, actually.
Yeah, you don't normally see like the extensive wounds that that you would normally see in a present day film. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Like even in Psycho, they don't really show any, but they don't show any like damage to flesh in Psycho, really, do they?
Right. No, I don't believe
any.
Very little, if any, and they had the
Psycho.
Yeah. And then, of course, you had, this may have been the first appearance then of the song. You had he is back at the house, and the kids are hiding, and he's just leaning against a post, just starts singing.
Yeah, like it's sort of like that game I play, Dead by Daylight. Like you can tell the killer is getting close to you because like a heartbeat noise will start to play faster and faster the closer they are to you, and like the hymns that he sang were kind of like it's called a terror radius. They were kind of like his terror radius because it's like
he also, they had separate.
Oh shit, he's getting close.
They had some really good silhouettes of him. Anywhere. I mean, when he first showed up, you saw his hat and his head.
He always loomed large in the scenes.
They did also have a musical score. They had notes specifically for him, for Willa. Most of the characters had bits in the score, but yeah, that hymn is just like so effective, and and that particular moment was fun. But that was then, of course, he goes into the house and chases the kids into the cellar, and the one thing we give Icy is that she may have saved their lives at that moment.
Yeah, because Icy is there,
right? But yeah, that was an interesting.
They trick him into this. They kind of trick him into the cellar. It's like, all right, that's enough's enough. Where's the money? Because he's just finished giving like some bullshit story to Icy. It's like, oh yeah, Willa ran away. I don't know.
Yeah.
And of course they totally fall for it. And it's like, it's under a stone in the basement. And it's like, okay, let's go down there. And he makes the kids go first. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, he figured it out. He thought, he figured it out because they were just going to like shove him down the stairs and like lock the door.
Mhm.
And they get down to the basement. And it's like, this basement is concrete. There are no stones. It's like, all right. And then he pushes like John down like onto a barrel. And it's like, where's the money? I'll kill you there. I can't remember exactly what he says, but he holds a knife to like a child's face, and it's like, I will cut your throat if you don't tell me where the money is. Or maybe you, little girl. Do you want to see that? The money's in my doll. It's like, huh. And he's like so surprised that he kind of like takes a beat. It's like, the doll, of course. Why was anybody would think to look? And he's kind of like, what the fuck? I didn't figure that out. There are a lot of scenes where he's just picking up the doll, throwing it around. And he's just kind of like he just like takes such a long moment for himself that they like knock a shelf over onto him, and he gets hit in the head with like a bunch of jars, and he's like, what? And that gives them time to like run away. And this was the moment that was in that Scariest Movie Moments clip show that got me to watch them in the first place. So the kids are running up the stairs, and he chases after them with his arms outstretched, kind of like Frankenstein. He's just like, because he's sort of in mask off mode for a bit there. He trips over another jar and like whacks his head, and gives them even more time to get to the top of the stairs and lock him down there. But that was such like a good sequence, because it's like, wow, he's really menacing this kid. It's like, how did they get away with this back then?
Right. Well, partly by having him fall and hit his head. I mean, they added that sort of semi-comic moment to what was a pretty
grim scene.
It was. And it probably was paying homage to Frankenstein, now that you mention that.
I think they talked about how like they had his... they talked about some of his wardrobe. Like he had like cuffs like Frankenstein in his arms, I think, right?
Maybe. Yeah. And then, of course, I think this is where the kids get in the skiff and go down the river, right?
Well, they try to get help from Uncle Bertie, but Uncle Bertie was like... out.
He's out. Yeah.
He goes to sleep in his bed like right away.
Yep.
So thankfully, his dad's rowboat that they were fixing is ready to go, and they pretty much just barely get into it before Powell catches up with them. Like, when Powell's like excited, he's apparently very klutzy, because he's like, "Yes, I'm gonna get the money." Shit! I fell in 4 feet of mud.
Right.
And,
oh man! And I just had, I just had a thought flash through my head, but it's not inappropriate. I think that would have succeeded too if it weren't for you blasted kids.
I mean, yeah. But there's a really like yeah, and then there's this really like spectacular like river sequence where they're just going down the river like in the boat, and it's very atmospheric, and like I want to use the word artsy, which makes it sound stupid, but it is a gorgeous sequence. So I'm gonna let you guys talk about that while I use the bathroom.
Like zoink, Scoob, are we just about to do this? Okay, so where are we at this moment in this film? So
we're down the river.
Okay, we're down the river with Huck. Okay, I really like that that sequence of them going down river. I mean, that gives you a sense of being on your own. And there was that point where they stopped for food, and it showed somewhat of the Depression era, right there when. What's that noise?
That's Jacob typing.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Okay, I'm done. What's up?
But in any case, that's pretty much all I had to say.
So yeah, basically they're floating down the river. You have a series of assorted sequences. You see nature in the foreground, very large. The kids floating behind. You see very kind of almost painted scenery in the background. You got a couple little vignettes here and there. The barn sequence was pretty cool, I thought. They decided to stay the night, and this was, I think, Dave, I think you talked about this already. The scene of him going by silhouetted against the
When he was on horseback.
Yeah.
When he was on horseback in the very far off distance, that's when you knew he was there.
Right, and singing the song. Yeah. What is something to wake you up in the morning, huh?
Right. Leaning on the everlasting arm.
Yes. Oh man! And so of course the dude John gets up and is like, "Get up! We need to go! We need to go!" And so they get back on the river. And I believe the next part is where Miss Cooper.
She's switching them with the reed.
Yeah. Don't hurt her. Hurt her. Oh, bathe her.
I don't understand why she was switching them.
Get them into the bath.
Yeah, well, again, it's culturally different in a way because you're looking at things from an older time as opposed to, current time.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's nothing wrong with that.
I personally wish we could go back to olden times.
It's again very different on how people were treated. I mean, she was harsh but fair, and that was the concept. She was the representation. I mean, you had a good. I mean, it's that dichotomy. You had the villain who showed all the craziness and evil that could come from a religious individual. But also you had her to represent the good that can come from the same.
Holy crap. Lillian.
Also, she's meant to represent Mother Goose.
Well, she... wow, they had an appropriate choice for such a character. Apparently, Lillian Gish died when she was 100 years old. She was, 99. Yeah. She was the star of silent film, which is why she was in the film in the first place. Yeah. But her last credit was 1987.
Nice.
That's kind of crazy, but yeah. But let's see. She was apparently big in D.W. Griffith's films, which was a big influence on this one. I'll get to more of that in a bit. But
with Griffith's pretty much just his filming style was, I think, what they were most inspired by, right?
Apparently, Laughton was. Well, Laughton was hugely inspired. What's up?
His Birth of a Nation was definitely controversial at the time.
Well, it still is.
What are you talking about? You've seen it, right? It is unbelievably not cool.
That's another film that he could have done. Jacob could jump in this.
Well, yeah, except that I didn't technically watch the whole thing. I've missed about the last 15 minutes. But I guess it could have worked.
It ends about how you'd expect.
Well, yeah. But yeah, Griffith was a huge influence on this film. And actually, according to the commentaries, and Dustin, you might have seen this too, they said that basically the appearance of Miss Cooper changes the film style in a lot of ways. It goes from being kind of surreal and impressionistic to being more normal if that's
Yeah, I
the
think
right way to put it.
that was kind of the term they used, because the only thing
Yeah.
I didn't get to on the Criterion Blu-ray was like the spare documentary about Laughton. So
Right.
I was able to go through all like the main supplements, like the stuff about Night of the Hunter.
Well, the one about Laughton by what's his face, Simon Callow, that was actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm
Oh, you mean the big one? The big one.
I mean
Yeah,
the 2.5
yeah.
hour thing. I didn't get to see that. I didn't have time to see that.
I didn't get to that
But that's
either.
that's my tomorrow morning, get work done with it in the background watch.
I'll save that for when I actually get the film.
Mhm.
Yeah, we had I actually watched. We had a copy in my library system, and I picked it up.
Nice.
Yeah, so that I could watch some of the bonus stuff.
I'm gonna try to see if my library has a copy of Eraserhead, because I opened my Criterion Blu-ray to watch that again because I was really feeling some David Lynch, and I started by reading the essay. Apparently, I got a misprint essay because like a quarter of the pages are missing.
Oh wow!
So it's like pages 1 through 16, they're fine, and then instead of page 17, I have page 1 again, and it goes 1 through 16 all the way up to page 33. So
how many pages?
So the first 16 pages are in the booklet twice, and like normal pages are missing.
I mean, like Night of the Hunter had like 7 or 8 pages, and that's kind of long for them.
The booklet in that's what you meant. The booklet in Eraserhead is like 60-some pages. It's quite long. It's also in very large print, and it's just like an interview with David Lynch, and it's sort of arranged to try to keep questions and responses on one page. So it was actually a pretty cool read that I was getting through really fast until weird problem. So, and apparently Criterion's email contact for problems like that is just one guy who doesn't check his email, because I haven't heard back in like a week and a half.
Okay. Good to know.
Grievances. Anyway, so back to Ms. Cooper. So they just did we talk about when they take that pit stop on the river? Which
one? The barn or the potato barn? Yeah, we did a little bit briefly.
Okay, that's a pretty cool scene that I really.
It is.
Because like they take shelter in that barn. Yeah, it's like, okay, we're gonna sleep on the ground tonight, and then, like I said, tear radius. And he just appears over the horizon. It's like, don't he ever sleep?
Oh man.
Good thing.
I just had another crazy thought. Well, you were just talking about, or I said briefly that this was like, or I think I made the comment that was a horrible way for the kids to wake up. It's like, and then I always talk about my use of music in film and how that should be a thing at the Oscars and all that kind of stuff. And I talked about the use of a repeated song in our video last week, where I was talking about Groundhog Day. Could you imagine being stuck in a Groundhog Day loop where you wake up to that song every day and you know where it's coming from? Oh,
this is a hell punishment. Got it.
Yes. Wow. That'd be even worse than waking up to Sonny and Cher every day.
True.
Yeah, that's what the preacher does in hell. They just hand him a pitchfork and like put him to work.
I guess
they'll intimidate these kids.
I guess the Happy Death Day Day director, we can maybe try to contact him and say, hey,
do that for the third installment.
Yeah,
I think they are working on a third installment.
Yes. You got to come up with some really, really, really badass. Whoever the killer is has to be really musically inclined, and they got to come up with some weird, creepy version of some god awful pop song.
Well, that series has been pretty good so far. I would like a third one.
All right.
I was impressed.
I need to see those. I'm actually curious.
They
about
are
them.
better than you'd expect.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
seen any of them.
Hmm.
I mean, when I saw that, like the second one came out almost on the back of the first one, I was like, "This doesn't bode well." They were great.
All
It
right.
seems like what Blumhouse does is they'll have ideas for several movies at once, and they'll only kind of make one at a time. Like they had I think 3 scripts ready to go for more Halloween movies, and it's like, okay, well, they almost shot them back to back from what I was told. So they decided to just, okay, we'll go with Halloween 2018 and then see how that does. And when it did well, it was like, okay, we'll start making the next 2. I think they took some time to do rewrites or something, though.
I'm curious about their version of Fantasy Island. Let's see how that goes.
Well, they just announced that they're working on another remake of The Thing. However, what's special about this is, so the original short story that The Thing was based off of, turns out there was a novel-length version that was thought lost to time called Frozen Hell, which was just discovered in its full form. So they're going to use that. So it's going to be like the Carpenter Thing and the Howard Hawks Thing with a lot of extra stuff.
And in this one, the Thing will actually be played by Kurt Russell.
I wonder if they'll actually.
They literally just said they were doing it like yesterday, so nobody knows anything.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll publish the novel then.
Almost certainly.
Actually, yeah, they said in the commentary that the novel for Night of the Hunter is out of print. I don't know if it's come back into print since then, but that seems kind of weird that wouldn't have happened.
You might be able to find an older copy. Like, I mean, I'm sort of interested in the novel, like after knowing that it's a novel, but I have kind of too much to read and do as it is. So.
Davis Scrubs.
Anyway, we should probably keep going. So they arrive at Miss Cooper's, and they made a big point that they always envisioned Miss Cooper as Mother Goose, like in terms of her character.
Right.
And I didn't notice this until they pointed it out in the commentary, but there are a bunch of like geese in front, out in her yard, like when they bring the children up. So Miss Cooper basically just adopts kids that I guess show up to her house, which seems to be a common thing because there are 3 of them there.
Well, it is the Depression, and you've got a lot of kids that were kind of homeless, and it was a rough time. And, we really and truly, even though we've been through stuff, and people say, well, the 2008 recession is just as bad as the Depression was. That's of course that's crap because that's nowhere near.
It's one of those technically worse kind of things, but you don't have like the human. You don't have like, the impactful imagery.
Okay, I have to mention that. I have to mention this because it amuses me. So I did look on Amazon, and Night of the Hunter is available on Kindle and paperback. They have one listing on hardcover for $1,875. It's like, wow.
Probably an original.
First edition? That must be a first edition.
They fucking sign it.
I guess. Wow. That's crazy. Oh, it says early printing. Okay, inscribed by the author on the end paper. Okay, well, that makes sense.
Put that on Amazon.
Okay. Yeah.
Is Amazon really going to have the clientele that would appeal?
Right.
You
never know. You really
I have
know.
A friend of mine, like her brother owns a bookstore in town, and there's a story about like that he told me about some of the stuff that Half Price Books gets sometimes, and I can't recall. I don't remember exactly what book it was. Like they got an old hardcover like donated to them, and it was some old very famous book, and it was signed by the author, and the bookmarks that had been used were letters written to the author by Mark Twain.
Wow.
And I was like, what did they do with it? And it's like, well, it's in a glass case at their corporate headquarters. And it's like, oh, okay.
That's
I
kind of
mean,
I imagine.
what do you even-
that was kind of the jumping off point for the plot of Can You Ever Forgive Me, which was a very interesting movie. But
but like, you never know what's gonna show up, I guess.
right, the so you got Ms. Cooper, who already has 3 girls that she's taking care of. One who's kind of almost an older teen, and then a couple younger ones. And they're already a handful, but she takes the other 2 in.
Yeah, they looked kind of like what, like 16, 17 for Ruby, and then maybe like what, like 12 and 9 or so for the other 2.
Yeah, more or less. I think the younger one was definitely older than the girl.
I like how when they stood next to each other, they were kind of like the Russian stacking dolls, and there was like a clear like height progression.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little
Like
bit.
a linear like curve.
Right. And then so you get scenes of like their domestic life. They go into town. You see Ruby flirting with the boys, and incidentally, the boy she's flirting with is the older brother of the kid that plays John. But and I think it was like his last movie. They both had a lot of stuff as kids, and then kind of grew out of it, I guess. But and then during one of these nights of flirtation, she runs into the preacher, who kind of slips his way in and buys her an ice cream and a magazine, and the other guy just has to go sulking off into the night.
I love how you can see just like, like the kids like come up here. It's like, hey, Ruby, and then like the preacher just like steps in front of him. It's like,
Right.
hey, you want that magazine? I'll buy it for you. And like the look of like hatred on that kid's face.
Yeah.
Like he looks so mad.
Oh yeah, I bet he would be. But it's kind of like that moment. Actually, the way you describe that is not that different from the way it is, but somehow makes it sound worse. But it reminds me of that scene that Brandon and I always make fun of in Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Yeah.
By that little boy, I give you a wish.
Oh
my god, it's so
I'm
cool.
happy I don't remember what that is. Simply from how it's being discussed. But yeah, so Preacher basically like has a date with Ruby.
Right.
So, and during that moment, like he buys her the magazine, he buys her some ice cream, and he's like, "Oh, so here you have some new kids at your place." It's like, what are their names? John and Pearl. Ah, okay. Do they have a doll with them? Oh yeah, they never let me touch that doll. And he like gets up and he's like, "Thanks," and he like walks away. And like the kid is like still outside the shop, it's like waiting for them to finish, like still pissed. And she just kind of like blows him off, and like as she's seeing the preacher like walk away, she sort of realizes like, oh
wait a minute, that's not a good thing.
Wait, that's
Maybe I
very
might
big
not,
red flag.
Maybe I shouldn't have opened my big mouth. Oh, gee golly.
There's a good scene where she tells Miss Cooper like what she did. It's like, don't paddle me or nothing, but I've been meeting boys in the city. And I was kind of surprised by how like understanding Rachel Cooper was about that. She's like, "Oh, it's okay," and she like holds her and like pats her back, and it's like, "Oh wow, I thought she was gonna yell at her."
Apparently, that was one of the additions to the book. Like it was from the screenplay that Laughton decided he wanted to keep. And they said in the commentaries that he might have been kind of a little bit of personal wish fulfillment with that scene, but which makes sense, have someone that understanding about that. It was a good scene. Yeah, it definitely was. Overall, I like most of the scenes with Miss Cooper. I think they did a good job with her.
Yeah.
Oh, she was awesome.
Yeah. See, and I think the next scene actually was the one where Ruby's out there getting the eggs, and she sees the dude come up, and she's like, "No, it's that man."
Like you can tell, like, even though like that initial, she still kind of has like a thing for him. Like she's still
Right.
sort of charmed, but at the same time, she's smart enough to be scared of him.
Right.
Like it's sort of hard to describe, but as soon as like she spots him like coming up to their house, like she drops the eggs and she's like, there he is, that's him.
Mm-hmm.
And like Miss Cooper just does not take any of his shit. Like he tries the left hand and right hand, love and hate are struggling, and she's just like, so why did the kids leave you?
Well, she's got the, Pearl goes up, oh, hey, kind of goes right to him. And John's just sitting there giving him the stink eye. And she's like, say hi to your pa. Well, he ain't my pa.
He ain't no preacher neither. And he doesn't get to go.
Neither. She levels the gun. It's like, yeah. Like, that's
well, in the time that, like, I don't know, that whole their first like interaction where she's just like asking him questions that he's completely dodging and just like giving bullshit answers on, and she can tell he's doing it too. So that was kind of a running theme where like some adults just do not fall for his shit. I wish I had a better descriptor for that, but so like he spots the doll on the ground because Pearl's dropped it. And as soon as like Ms. Rachel is gone, like he dives for the doll, like John stops it. John grabs it and like runs like under the house.
Yeah.
And like he immediately, like in front of the other kids, like pulls his knife and like starts going after John. And that's when Rachel comes out with the gun and is like, all right, get.
Well, he wasn't expecting that gun either. It was
No.
He was laying down. He didn't know what it was that she had hit him with on the back. But when he realized it was the gun, and it's one thing that touches on that to me is kind of a flaw, but it comes out more at the end of this. I don't know. It's again a flaw in the madness, maybe some sanity in the madness.
Like, shit, run.
Yeah, right. But then he like turns around and says something like, I'll be back after not dark or something. And it's like, why tell them that? It's like,
so I mean, plus it is kind of weird that she doesn't call the cops right away.
right.
Because I mean, like, he just pulled a knife on a child in front of some witnesses, I think. Although it seemed like he kind of did it like when he got down, like closer to the crawl space, so maybe they didn't see the knife. But that was like that was a good precursor for kind of the climax of this movie.
And then of course they have the scene she's sitting up with the gun and all the kids are kind of she's keeping them near her, and of course you hear him humming the song once again. But then you have that weird sort of almost a duet where she's singing different lyrics that do include Jesus, and he is not. And it's kind of like you get the two, kind of the twisted version of the hymn and then a more regular version.
Actual hymn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of an interesting.
They described it as like the angel and the devil.
It's almost like a version of Dueling Banjos. It's kind of. It's interesting.
I think my favorite part of that scene is like, she knows he's there, and that's why she's in that spot, because as long as she knows he's there, what's he gonna do? Like, try something and get blasted,
right?
And then Ruby kind of messes it up because she hears him singing and she wakes up. And she comes down like to see what's going on, like with a candle. And the light, I thought this was a really cool shot. The light from the candle kind of obscures like it kind of like shimmers the screen that she's sitting in front of, and she can't see him for a second, and she's like, and she quickly blows out the candle, and he's fucking gone.
Yeah.
Good heavens.
Artistically, that was an amazing shot because you could perfectly see the inside and outside of the house during that portion. And it was just a really cool scene the way that they did it. I thought that
it's probably as good a time as any to say that the on that note, the and you know, we're kind of running a little bit late, so I don't know if this is going to be as structured breakdown as we sometimes do. But like on the light, they had a cinematographer, they had a camera person, Stanley Cortez, who was very talented, had worked with Orson Welles and a whole bunch of other big names. And but apparently Cortez has a quote that has been shared by a bunch of people that he only ever worked with two directors who understood lighting, and that was Welles and Laughton. And basically, and this scene was a good illustration of that, where Laughton understood the importance of lighting, which is kind of cool.
Oh yeah. I know one thing I liked about the entire film, especially at night, in the silhouette of the house. Did you notice how the fog was especially thick? Just a little bit rising, especially when Willa came to the house.
Accentuate that, yeah.
I mean, you could see the smoke rising in front of her as she was about to enter the house right before I think he went after Pearl, yeah.
Before he kills her like pretty shortly afterward too. So it almost sort of, that whole creepy atmosphere sort of almost foreshadows that a little.
Yeah,
we know it was probably coming at some point, but.
And then, of course, one thing that once he disappears, everyone's kind of huddled together, and you get another one of those attempts at kind of a blend of horror and comedy, where he steps on the cat, and Rachel knows where to fire the gun and manages to wound him because he stepped on a cat, and it's kind of like. That's kind of a unfortunate anticlimactic sort of thing.
It's like, wow,
and then she finally does call the cops, and I love this. She's like, "I got something trapped in the barn."
Yeah, and we need to take a moment for like his whole freak out, because it's not really clear if she hits him or not. If she hit him or not, we see later that she tagged his shoulder really good.
Right.
Like, he seems to not be able to use that arm.
Right.
And like as soon as she hits him, he's like, ah, and he like runs out of the kitchen like whooping and hollering. Yeah. It's very difficult to describe.
Right.
Like it's
like yelping.
It's pretty silly. But at the same time, it's another one of those like mask off, you know, we see the craziness beneath this like slick exterior.
And one other thing I meant to mention, it was shortly before this, I think during the scene where she's sitting up with the gun, and they have the scene of the owl and the mouse, and the owl swoops down at the mouse.
Oh, that was great.
And then she has that line when she says, "It's a hard world for the little things." And I have to point that out because that line was quoted verbatim in Raising Arizona. The Coens specifically called out this movie by using that line, and it was kind of fun to revisit it and go, "Oh, that's where that came from."
Oh yeah, also like the love-hate thing on like the Knuckles, because you do see that. I mean, I mentioned the Simpsons earlier, but you do see it here and there sometimes.
That's become a pretty big part of pop culture, I think. It's been pretty I think a lot of people just do that on their own, whether they know where it came from or not.
Yeah.
But Yeah, but it has been spoofed, I think, in not just Simpsons, but like either spoofed or used seriously in other films too.
Yeah.
Um,
But anyway, so
I almost feel like, do you remember Secret Window?
yes.
I almost feel like that character that was going up against Johnny Depp.
The John Turturro character?
Yeah,
Yeah.
was kind of like a Night of the Hunter character.
A little bit. It might have been shades of that.
I
And
know.
I'm sure Stephen King was influenced by this movie. I mean,
Owl is such a uniquely nasty and menacing character. I can't really think of anybody like him in another movie. I mean, maybe Kane from like Poltergeist 2. Maybe just because of the preacher thing, but
I have to
pretty
say,
pretty unique guy.
you know, I just got a completely random thought though. Talking about, he did remind me of someone, and I have this every now and then when I'm watching old films. They'll remind me of people, and I'll think like, "Wow, what if they remade it with that person in the role or whatever?" But if they had remade this circa Groundhog Day,
George Clooney.
no, I was going to say a lot of Mitchum's mannerisms in this movie, not so much the way he looks, but his mannerisms reminded me a lot of Bill Murray. A lot.
Oh shit!
And I'm just thinking that would have been interesting. He's probably too old for the role now, but
I think George Clooney would be pretty good.
yeah. But well, we had another. That was a.
We had another digression, but anyway, so the cops show up in force like the next morning, and we get a parallel to the scene where his father was arrested, and John kind of has a little bit of an emotional breakdown here.
Yeah.
He's seeing the scene play out again, and so he runs up to Paul and he's like just hitting him with the doll, and the money's flying out of it. He's just like, take it, I don't want it. Just because the money's been like nothing but trouble, because the money got their, the money got their father killed, the money got their mother killed, like the money got them like driven from their home. Like it's been nothing but trouble. Like I don't think they even spent any of it.
Nope.
Nope. She, little girl, just go ahead.
I was gonna say it's a powerful scene, and I mean, to me, I felt like he was a pretty good actor for a child actor, especially with that scene and the original scene having mirrored. I mean, looking at that, I mean that was a clear trauma to him, watching his father be taken away, pretty much to die.
I do think that when I saw this the first time, that scene might have been part of the reason I disliked the film, because I didn't understand why he would do that. But now, your trauma makes you do weird things, and I can understand it more now.
And I couldn't understand why the cops weren't like trying to shield the child in any way, shape, or form. They could have at least seen the child that was there and take him like somewhere else, to not see them, take him into custody, and treat him.
I mean, it was the 30s. Cops didn't give a shit about that.
Yeah, they weren't going to care about that.
I mean, they just like stand there and like let him like wallop the guy with the doll. I almost wonder if the way the cops in this movie were, I almost wonder if it was like, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of money coming out of that doll. Whatever. And
this was still Keystone Cop era then.
I don't remember what the context was.
Probably did not.
But I heard the joke. It's like sending the Keystone Cops to arrest John Wick. And I just enjoy that phrase so much. So I had to share.
Well, yeah, I do think once they saw the money coming out, they were probably like, "Ooh, payday came early." And there also is the fact you're watching a kid beat a grown man with a girl's doll. They probably thought, we'll never get to see this again. Let's go ahead and enjoy it.
Sure. And then we get to one of my favorite scenes where they finally have the trial, and we kind of learn the extent of the crimes that Powell has committed. like Miss Icy is there. It starts with like it's like a close up of Icy, and she's just screaming, "Lynch him,
Yeah.
Bluebeard! 25
Yeah.
wives. He killed every last one of them. Get him." Blue.
Yeah. That was kind of that was a little crazy, but
Well, I thought it was great because like she was like so gung ho. It's like this is the best man who's ever come to our town. This is awesome. It's like,
Yeah.
and then like finding out she basically finding out it's like, oh, I got my friend killed because I pushed her to marry this guy who always kills his wives. So
and yet she apparently blamed the kids because, and honestly, probably the scene that bugged me the most was where she led the mob to heckling the kids, and it was like, what? Why? What were you doing that for? What was
like,
the?
there they are. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we're going out the back. It's like, what the fuck?
She wasn't exactly helpful to the situation. That's
No, she
Well, it was a
wasn't.
lynch mob. Everyone was going nuts.
Yeah.
Like,
Now I
she
did
was-
like the 180 that the hangman did, where it was like you have that nice little scene early on where he's talking about how difficult it is to end a life, and he looks at his own kids and thinks about the guy had kids, and then at the end they're like, "We got another hanging for you." Yeah, this one's going to be a good one. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
it was so the mob is like outside the police station. Ruby is standing outside the police station for some reason, and like Miss Cooper is like, come on. She just like drags her away.
Yeah.
She's still kind of bamboozled.
Yeah.
And the mob's getting close. The mob has broken into a furniture store, and you can see them like breaking apart chairs so that they have like more clubs and shit. Like I enjoyed that.
Right.
And with the mob getting close to the police station, like they sneak Powell out the back door, and the cops are just like, "We're saving this bird for you, Bob," because Bob's the hangman. And Bob's like, "This time it'll be a privilege."
Yeah, there you go. You remembered it better. Yeah, but yeah, he was so cheerful about it. Yeah, but
But
Well, you know,
anyway, and it
it
ends
happened to a
with,
bitter guy.
and the movie ends with Christmas at Miss Cooper's house,
mhm.
and more or less like all is forgiven, and you get a
Mhm.
sense that things are going to be okay. So
Mhm.
Miss Cooper gives Ruby like this jewelry. I think it's called a brooch, right? That's what that is.
Right.
And so like things are kind of patched up between them. Like it really emphasizes like no judgment for getting tricked by Powell.
Well, they make the point repeatedly in the bonus materials that one of the themes, a major theme, was redemption.
Yeah.
And yeah, most of the characters get a measure of redemption. Not all of them, obviously, but
Yeah.
but some of them. And definitely, you get the strong triumph of good versus evil in the end, which should have appealed to audiences at the time, but
I
then
know,
we get,
it's the 50s. People were stupid.
well, yeah, but then we get to what happened after the thing, where apparently United Artists had no idea what they had. They had no idea how to market it. I've seen some of the marketing materials, and it's like you can't even tell what the movie is from that. It's like, yeah, and they apparently did it on a double bill with a Frank Sinatra picture that is much less well known. They also Mitchum worked on that film too, and apparently they made him leave Night of the Hunter to work on the other film, and he had to come back to film scenes.
Do you happen to know what the name of the other film was?
It was unimportant. I saw a poster for it, but I don't remember what it's called.
I do vaguely. If you give me a moment, I'll look it up. But that was it was kind of they didn't really choose well there. But so while I'm looking that up, anyone have any other thoughts on the basic plot or characters? We've pretty well hit it all.
I thought there was kind of a nice, like, poignant moment to close on, where the scene where he first opens up to Miss Cooper, she asks him to bring her an apple, because while after they show up, they're kind of, like, they'll do what they're told, but they don't seem to really trust her all that much. And that's kind of an important scene. Like, she reads them a Bible story about Moses, and John kind of opens up to her a little bit, and like actually touches her hand. Like it's sort of like when you get like a dog to like trust you, and it'll like let you touch it. I don't know. I'm making it sound really stupid, but it's a really great character moment. And
I like the start of that scene though, where she pulls out the Bible and he cringes away and steps out on the porch, and it's kind of like, I don't blame him after this so-called preacher
murdering preacher.
Okay, so here we go. Not As a Stranger was the other film, which was nominated for an Oscar. But it had a hella cast: Olivia de Havilland, Robert Mitchum, Frank Sinatra, Gloria Graham, Charles Bickford, Lon Chaney Jr., Harry Morgan, Lee Marvin. I mean, that's pretty decent cast. Directed by Stanley Kramer.
I'm just gonna finish the scene so people know that I had a point. So at the end, she's getting Christmas presents from the other kids, and he goes into the other room and he takes like a doily or whatever it's called off the table and an apple from like the basket and like wraps it in the doily, and he gives her the apple, and she's like, "This is the richest gift anyone's ever given me." I was like, "Aw." And she got him early. There's a scene right after they get the money where he's, eyeing a pocket watch, and it's like, "You could buy it," and he's like, and she gets him a pocket watch, and he's super happy to have the pocket watch. And so I really liked the close of this too. Anyway,
actually, you had that scene early on where he's looking at a watch, and that lady was just nasty. She was just because we kind of skipped over the fact that a lot of people seem to be blaming the family for the father's actions, which was kind of an issue, unfortunately. But
yeah.
You had the kids singing that song.
If we talked about everything in this movie, we'd be here like all night, which we kind of already have been. I feel like we've touched on like most of like the most interesting stuff, but there's still so much. There's a lot going on in this movie. Like one thing that makes it so different from a lot of like these older films is just like the way it's paced. Like stuff is always happening and there's always something to look at. Like there's never really a slow period, even though it does have slow periods in terms of, okay, we're watching the boat calmly go down the river, but it's very visually interesting. You don't really have an opportunity to get bored, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And like this movie has something going on like at every moment, so we could cover it almost frame by frame.
And it is only an hour and a half long, so it's not really
it's very tight too. Like there's no filler.
Right, which apparently the first draft of the screenplay was close to 300 pages, so that would have been a whole different creature. But
they did an excellent job tying this down to what it needed to be.
Right.
And that is a great thing. Good, our video finished.
There was a comment somebody made about it. I was like, okay, here's the screenplay, and they just like dropped this like dictionary on them, and like they told the writer, they were talking to the writer, and it's like, what do you mean each page is supposed to be a minute of screen time?
Yeah, there was a lot of controversy over James Agee's role in the writing. Apparently, Agee did a good job of streamlining the novel, but Laughton actually took it and rewrote it in a much slimmer screenplay. But he borrowed a lot from Agee, and there was a lot of controversy over the years about how much was Laughton, how much was Agee marginalized, was he fired, all this kind of stuff. And eventually they figured out that it was just give and take. It wasn't anything as dramatic as everyone said it was. But AG kind of got, his name got kind of darkened because of this,
Well,
unfortunately.
that was the essay. That was the second essay in the Criterion release.
Right.
Did you read that too, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounded like he was way more involved than anyone ever thought before,
Right.
which is kind of sad.
And he had experience with blending comedy and drama and horror and whatever, because he did write, The African Queen and a couple others, and
Yeah, a lot of the best lines and like memorable things came from him too. So,
like I think my favorite line in African Queen, I think, was something like, "You may kiss the bride. Now proceed with the execution."
That movie was a classic under many levels.
African Queen is the name of the boat, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. So I remember a joke in Archer. It's like, the African Queen with Audrey Hepburn. How is Audrey Hepburn the African Queen? It's like, staying away from
that. Pat Hepburn, wasn't it? But anyway. Does anyone want to make any more points about the production, about the special effects, lighting, anything along those lines?
I think we covered most of it throughout, but I'm going to let other people take some cracks at it because I have to step away for a moment.
Okay.
Well, I mean, really and truly, when you look at the music and everything else involved, I mean, shoot, that theme that he sings, that in of itself is just freaking creepy.
Use of music and film.
I never thought that they could take essentially a hymn and make it as creepy as they did.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen at least one other instance, but it's not coming to me right away, so maybe I'm remembering that wrong. I've definitely seen songs turned on their head before, like, of course, Singing in the Rain and Clockwork Orange and, things like that, but and then again, The Killer and M had that whistle theme that he did that was, which I want to say Tarantino was paying an homage to that with Daryl Hannah's character in Kill Bill too, because she had a whistle theme that was pretty damn creepy.
Well, that's the thing about like certain types of movies, including horror, because a good horror film, and King was good at this, can take any theme, any music, and have you associate that so differently.
Right.
I mean, to this day, that song that they keep playing in 1408 creeps me out every time I hear it now.
Yeah.
Or even In the Mood, because he uses that in Rose Red.
True.
And A Summer Place. These type of things, these are not meant to be creepy, but because of the context, a well done film can make that.
I think the song that you're talking about in 1408 was wasn't it Karen Carpenter?
Yeah, it was Carpenter. I just couldn't remember the name at the time.
Alrighty. So, do we want to get into favorites?
I would have to say my favorites two scenes were where I could see him silhouetted against the background, and like I said when Willa was coming up to the cottage, and some reason, just the way the way that maybe the stage was set, the fog was just right to me, and I think anytime the preacher's saying leaning.
Yeah. All right, Brandon.
Well, I can. I mean, it's a real easy one for me. Just the introduction of the villain
Mhm.
driving along in the car and doing that little monologue at the beginning.
Yeah.
So much character. It's just so much exposition, so much that was defined as a character.
Hmm.
It really was a wonderful way of doing it, and got me invested right away.
And it doesn't even
I
feel like exposition either.
Hmm.
I was invested from the beginning thanks to that.
Hmm.
I will. I have to say that's got to be my favorite.
All right. That's good.
How about you go next?
Okay. Um, I I think there were little moments, like pretty much every time where he's humming the hymn, it's going to rank near the top or at the top. Possibly the most effective being the scene in the barn with them silhouetted in the distance. But the dueling hymns was also pretty fun. But also, like, just a couple of, I agree with Brandon about the opening scene and the scene where, again, the scene in the jail cell where you had him explaining his religion, where he said that was the one I worked out twixt myself. Just the way he said that and the utter hypocrisy of that statement, it just stuck with me. And yeah.
So, well, for me, oh, I'm sorry. Were you not done or?
Oh, I'm done.
Oh, okay. I felt kind of bad. Like, oh crap! I stepped on his toes anyway. Damn it. Well, for me, it's kind of difficult to pick one favorite. So I guess I'm gonna kind of go with two. So the reveal of the money's hidden in the doll, like where he's menacing the children in the basement, and that whole sequence, like it has kind of a special thing for me because that's what I remember the most about this movie, and it's also the reason I wanted to see this movie in the first place. So it's kind of an important scene. It's an important scene to me for that reason, and so plus the scene itself is just incredible. And after watching it another time for the show, I think I also enjoy like the first confrontation between Cooper and Powell, like that banter where she's like questioning him and sees right through him right away. And then of course like the way it ends, and he ain't no creature. It's like you get the sense that John told her, like in an off-camera scene, that John told her what happened, and she's finally realizing this is the guy. So that added some oomph to that scene, which was already a pretty powerful scene. But
of course, he may or may not have told her because she does seem like a very intuitive person. She's easily one of the most intuitive people in the film. Which is not exactly a contest in some cases, but but at any rate, and yes, I agree with that scene in the basement. The moment where he finds out, the reaction he has was pretty big. It's like, oh, I never thought of that.
Man, I was ripping up floorboards. I was doing all this other shit.
Such a well-acted movie.
Probably how I would have reacted, honestly.
Right. But yeah, that's definitely like that total like, oh man, I feel so stupid moment. But anyway, so I guess we have had a nice long chat on this one. Time to do the wrap up, I guess.
Yep, I'll go first.
Okay.
I bed for class.
Go for it.
So I'm Dustin, mainly known as the Crypt of Horrors. So I'm a horror collector living here in Milwaukee while I go to school. And you can see my horror collection on my YouTube channel, where I show off like new pickups and try to do some reviews from time to time. I'm the Crypt of Horrors on there. I also have an Instagram for a handful of stuff from the collection. Also, the Crypt of Horrors. And I lurk on Twitter quite frequently, as you guessed it, the Crypt of Horrors. So come hang out with me across the different internet dimensions. And the more followers we have, the more obligated we'll feel to post stuff. So come make me do stuff, I guess.
Actually, before you
Yeah.
go, isn't next week's movie your choice? I believe The Changeling.
Oh, we get to do the Changeling? Hell
Yeah.
I've been so busy with getting my semester going. I kind of missed what was on the docket. So we get to do the Changeling next week. That's great. Yeah, that was a movie that the first time I saw it, it was like, and I barely like paid attention to it. And then I saw it again, like 6 years later on Joe Bob's Last Drive-In on Shudder when they did that this past year, and it was just blowing my mind. Like everything, it's like, how did I miss that? Oh my god, this is terrifying. Like it is very hard to scare me or make me feel like not at ease. And it just impressed me so much. So I am.
That's 1980.
Yeah. It's a ghost story, but also has this like really dark premise.
That could be fun.
Oh man, it is intense.
It was a fun horror film.
I'll have to set myself to finding a copy.
I don't know if I'd say it's fun. I got mine from I got the Blu-ray from, I think it's Severin put it out. I'm not exactly sure who put the Changeling out, but I got it at Flashback Weekend in Chicago. So it is over on the shelf where I cannot reach without taking off my headphones. But yeah, I think you can get it on Amazon for like $20. It's a pretty common title. Oh,
yeah, that's the movie I thought it was.
Yeah, so or you can see it on. You can see
that's
it
the
on
one
Shudder,
where
that's
the one where it ends with the whole place is shambles, right?
Yeah, I don't want to. Well,
yeah, I don't want to.
You guys have all
it
seen
entirely.
it, right? Well, probably not actually.
But,
yeah, it has one hell of a climax, and I was like standing up in my chair, like, oh my god, like during that climax, and then Shudder like glitched out, and the app closed in the middle of it, and I was like, no. I was like screaming at Shudder. It's like, your service went out. Oh my god, help!
Oh, is it on Shudder?
Yeah, it's on Shudder. Because
Good.
Joe Bob did it on an episode of Last Drive-In about around April last year, and they can only have him do movies that they have. So it should be on Shudder, yeah. You guys hopefully have Shudder at the very least for the new Creep Show, because it's amazing. I mean, Joe Bob is
I've
awesome
seen the
too.
first episode.
But oh man, I love Creep Show. Like House of the Head, like it's like the scariest story where nobody dies. Like holy shit. Well, okay, technically things do die. It's just you're not sure about the reality of it. It's complicated. That's really good. Watch Creep Show 2019.
How did you die, Joseph? How did you die in this house? Why do you remain? All right. That sounds like it.
Have you really not seen it?
Nope. I've seen the Clint Eastwood Changeling.
Oh, fuck that one. Like, I think that's so much. So, like trying to search for this Changeling, like that stupid damn thing, like pops up all the time. Like, I wish it didn't exist. Like
I do
trash.
have that one.
Pure trash.
Yep. I have that one myself. It was a good film. It was well acted.
That one came out after 1970.
I don't know. There are certain movies I like. There are certain movies I totally despise because they confound like other things. Like when I was still looking for a copy of Alligator, I would do searches for Alligator DVD, and 90% of the results would be some stupid fucking movie like Albino Alligator. This fantasy drama, and it's like fuck you.
Is that movie Kevin Spacey directed?
Even more fuck albino alligator.
We still need to watch.
All right. So
Anyway, what was I talking about? I got lost.
Actually, I guess we can move
Changeling.
on to the next
Okay.
person.
Oh,
All right.
right. Yeah.
Oh, Brandon.
All right. Well, since we've
Night, guys.
gone
Alright.
over what next week's is, that'll be good. I am Septum Sen of Septum Sen versus the World. We are a channel on YouTube that is all about that physical media. Matter of fact, I just uploaded a video for Friday. That will be our next in our Oscar series. We have one more after this one, as a matter of fact. Actually, no, two more, because we discussed the winners. But this week, we did a top 10, and I named it 10 times the Oscars flubbed it.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna be checking that one out.
it
This
took
one's
a
for
lot
you,
of
Dave.
Hey,
This one
real quick,
took-
I did forget something. I have new videos coming at some point this week. They're just being edited, so yeah.
Sounds
Good to hear. Love your videos when we get to watch them.
I just need to make them. Like I shot like 5 or 6 different ones with all the stuff that I had gotten since I last made one, which was like November through now.
That's okay. I have a couple of ones that I've been planning on doing of stuff since I've had 2 boxes sitting right here that I have not gotten videotaped, and I'm like, jeez.
Anyway, I didn't want to step on your toes too much. I just wanted to remember to add that. So, later, guys.
Okay.
So again, if you guys if anyone out there has anything that resembles interest in Oscar, or hates Oscar for that matter, this will be the video for you. I actually spent a good portion of last night and most of this evening. Matter of fact, I spent from 5:30 to almost the time we started editing the rest of the video. So I did a lot of work on that one, and both of us actually did a lot of some interesting research into it. So I think it's going to be a fun list overall. And of course, you also get to join us for the other aspects of our channel. I'll pick up videos and new release videos every Tuesday and Wednesday. And of course, for those of you who like reviews, we do those occasionally. I know I've got one coming up in the making of the Camp Blood number 8, because I've been meaning to do that and I have yet to follow through. The Oscar season has kind of slowed me down. Of course, I've moved up to a 7-day a week format. So there is a new video every day so far. We'll see how long that holds. But during that time, I spend Thursdays talking about the Anhedonia Project, where we have covered different ones every week. I have quite a few of them left to go. As a matter of fact, I just uploaded all of February's, and we still haven't dented into that particular series yet. So it's all going to be fun to do. If you enjoy Evan Jacobs and his movies, you should check it out. And if you want to know who he is, of course, you should also check it out. And then finally, if you enjoy looking through a person's DVD collection, I have plenty of DVD, video game, and music tours in store.
All right. Very good. So I'll go ahead and sign off my little last one, then we'll hand it to Dave to finish us off.
Okay.
I am Kotobuki Jake. I also am here in Central Virginia and frequently guest on Septum Sin versus the World. And yes, we did have a fun Oscar discussion this week. We also had a kind of a massive pickup video this week that I think it'll be fun to check out. It'll, sit down with some popcorn or something, and and then of course, last week we had kind of a massive video, but it was a very big one. It was the people who really, really should have been nominated for roles that were not nominated. And to be honest, after tonight, I'm kind of thinking Robert Mitchum and dang it, I'm drawing a blank now. It's too late. The other one. The other one. Wow, I'm really feel bad about that. It's just so late. Lillian Gish. There we go. They could have deserved some credit for their roles in this one. But, which, of course, were not nominated. Night of the Hunter was not up for a single Oscar. Big surprise, given that it crashed and burned when it was first released, but whatever. Sometimes the great films do, And so anyway, and this was a learning experience for me. I definitely had a better second viewing this go around, and I'm happy for it. And I'll hand it to you, Dave.
All righty. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Streggy. I run Inside Movies Galore. I am a producer of various films. If you want to know about them, just go on my IMDb page. And I happen to do some reviews and video collections of my own on my own channel when I get a chance to. Lately, I haven't been able to get around to what I want to do, but I do have a couple of videos that I have actually updated with my new video techniques that I have learned. So definitely check some of those out. Right now, I'm going through the Rambo series of films. So definitely check those out when I get a chance. And I'll probably be putting up random films I've been asked to do. So in any case, check those out and like, share, and subscribe. And like we said, next week we're going on about The Changeling, and Dustin will be our host.
Actually, I did not think about it, but next week we will also be trying to start a monthly journey for the pre-show into the world of X-Strike, a small studio that has been trying to revive recently. And we're going to go through their catalog. It's about video game movies. And the first film that will be coming on next week is River City Rumble.
All right.
Starring Darren DeMarco and David Ottovino. A really fun way to start out a fun project.
Definitely sounds like an interesting project to view. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Inside Movies Galore, and you have been warned. In any case, definitely check out some of the other episodes, and stay tuned for some more exciting adventures in film. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone.
Night.
Good night.